Okay. Hi. So I'm here today with Melanie again for interview number 2. We did the Street Epistemology survey a couple weeks ago. No, it's been a couple months
Yeah.
by this point, hasn't it? And Melanie has come to our Street Epistemology group meetup group here in Salt Lake City once, and we've talked about this a few times. So this is not her first interaction. So welcome back. Thanks for agreeing to meet with me again. So let me just ask you really quick, what did you think of the meetup, the meeting that you went to when you were here in town?
I thought it was really exciting that you could pull a group together of people that cared enough about these things. Oh, wait. Got a notification to do an update. So it's so nice that there are people that care. Yeah. We're surrounded by people that are just in their own world and worrying about themselves and their own families and their own well-beings, and they're not wondering why they're on this planet and what is true and how do they align with it so that we can get the most out of our life experience here. And it was nice to be around people that liked to talk about those things.
Yeah, it is really pretty unusual to find like a group of people, especially that want to talk about these things and deep dive into subjects and see like, why do I believe this? What is going on here? And just the fact that they show up I'm always like kind of amazed, but it's been really, really fun. So yeah, I'm glad you could come to that one meeting. And then our discussions afterwards and stuff are really good too. So yeah, that was a fun weekend.
And it was really an interesting like demographic. It was nothing I could predict. You know, we had young, old, different body types. And I think what's interesting is in Utah, you know, that's where it happened. There's like a heavy Mormon influence. And so I think there's a lot of healing going on in Utah and just around the world in these really thick, like religious subcultures. And it's time for those to be uprooted and examined and looked at. So it was really nice to see that happen in Utah, especially.
Yeah, I love the fact that a lot of the people that attend the group are either like questioning Mormons or transitioning out of Mormonism or completely left. We've had a few that just have no relation to Mormonism whatsoever. So it's nice to get like both perspectives too, because it is a big mind shift that you have to do at some point, which takes healing and work, like you said. So that's pretty fun to see that the people's wheels turning in their brains and see how that process takes place. And I think street epistemology is really good for helping with that process and just discussing the how you think about things and changing the way we think about things is kind of cool. So, okay. I listened to our interview a couple months ago. I can't remember what the date was that, but whenever that was. So I listened to it the other day.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do you want to talk about some of those things, or do you have like, you know how this works at this point, right? Like you make a claim and then we dive into the claim. So what are you thinking?
You know what? I don't care either way. Yeah. I don't remember anything specific that came up at that meeting that like had me thinking more about it. You know, I just was able to express how I'm unpacking things.
Yeah. Okay, I made a few notes. You mentioned that we all have souls, and I thought that might be something interesting to dive into. We could talk about what is a soul, like how do you define souls? How do you know that and all those things? And you said there is a divine expression which brings things into alignment, which I thought was an interesting group of words because we didn't really dive into definitions of that. And there is some term that you defined as God or a mysterious divine expression that is an unseen force in our lives. So any of those are interesting to me. So do you want to pick one of those?
Sure. I mean, you brought up the first one, which is the soul, which I know is, it's elusive. And, I think it exists only because we see the effects of it. And so it's me trying to explain the energy that organized matter within my mother's womb that turned into me, for example, and what is the energy that made me express as an individual that is separate from you. And my guess is that's how I would define the soul, is that unique energy that expressed as me.
Yeah, let's go with that one, just with the claim that we all have souls.
Okay.
Is that a good one you're okay with that?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay. I mean, we can always switch later, or
yeah, no, I think that's good.
Or whatever.
I need to look at that one.
And I don't have a clock in front of me, so if you need to go
okay, yeah,
at any time, just let me go. I guess I can check my phone, but
yeah, no, we're okay.
Okay, yeah, just let me know.
I can see
it. Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so let's go with we all have souls. And what's your confidence level that we do all have souls?
Okay, so really I got to think about this, because the word soul is a word, and it's describing something that's very difficult to describe.
And we can get into the definitions in a minute. Let's get a number of confidence. Like 0 is we absolutely do not have souls, and 100 would be we absolutely 100% do have souls.
Okay, I'm gonna go with 100%.
Okay. Nice and high as it gets.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're very confident, very sure that souls exist, that the concept of a soul is a real thing.
Well, I'm as confident that souls exist that you and I exist, and that we are operating independently of each other for the most part. Okay. And that's another thing we could unpack, is how are we connected? And that's another thing, because I think there's different levels of like there's the individuated being, which is a human form. And then I think there is another level where we operate more connected. But yeah.
Which might have something to do with the souls, or having a soul.
Yeah. Some people would call that like the oversoul. And that's, and I think I've used this term before. It's like, that's more of the collective consciousness.
Oh yeah, so we did talk about that too.
Yeah. So I think each species has its own like signature where they are connected. I think it's easier to see in like bees and other species, but I'm thinking as humans, we have that too.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you think that every single human has a soul? Are there any people that don't have souls? And we'll just leave animals, other species out of it for now, and we'll just talk about humans.
Yeah, I would say yes. They all have souls.
So even if there's somebody in a coma, or let's say brain dead, or just on life support or something, they still have a soul, you would say?
Yes.
Okay. And what is a soul exactly? If you were to define it, what's your understanding?
I think it's the unseen, organized force that brings matter into order, that expresses, in this case, as a human form. I think the alive human has a soul. The dead human body, I think, is separated from their soul.
So an unseen, organized force that brings, can you repeat that last part again?
Unseen, organized force that brings matter into form and expresses as a unique individual that is alive. I changed it a little at the end.
Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, an unseen force that brings matter into form and expresses as an alive individual. Is that close enough? Did I miss anything?
I think that covers, that's pretty good.
Okay. How would you recognize an unseen organized force like that?
I recognize it by the effects of it, which is the living, breathing, alive human being in front of me.
Mm-hmm. Does your soul give you your personality and who you are?
That's a great question. Okay, so this is where I'm getting into belief I can't prove, but I'm on the path of understanding what a lot of mystery schools have taught as the law of correspondence. So one thing mirrors the other. So like the spiral in the fingerprint mirrors the spiral in the universe, or you know how there's things that sort of mirror each other in nature. And I think when we're born, okay, so matter in our mother's womb organizes because each cell is taking information from the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the environment at the time of our birth, it imprints on that soul. And I do think the energy, okay, just like a computer hard drive, right? It gets formatted. And from that formatting, you can add software, and then it's this operating system. And then there's information that comes in, and then the output is how you operate. So I think when a human is being formed, I think they're taking cues from the environment, and then they start to become formatted as a human being. And I think there's something to us being formatted as babies and when we're born that affects us into our lives. And that could show up as our personality or as different themes or like energies that we work with, that there's like patterns around that. That's why I think there's validity to astrology.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think where the universe was at the time of our formation, I think that affects us, just like what my mother ate when she was pregnant with me, or the conversations she had. And I even think down to the emotions she had. I think I was affected by those because I wasn't separate from her yet. And I think the cells take cues from the environment, and that forms them, and that affects their personalities long term.
So you think there's a naturalistic effect on your personality, the chemicals as your body is forming, your human physical form is being put together and forming and growing. And at some point, do you think the soul joins in with that, or is it formed along with the way your brain and your chemistry and your bones and your whole physical dynamic is coming together?
My guess is that the soul is there all along, and that is the force that is organizing all these things to become.
The soul is where all along?
So it's present.
Was it there before conception, or do you think it becomes present at conception?
This is where
another time?
Yeah. So, okay. And this is just, me guessing, I guess, at this point. So I want to believe, or it makes sense to me that, I don't even know if it makes sense, but so I got to be careful. So,
yeah,
okay,
take your time.
Okay. I'm going to use the word belief. Okay.
Okay.
And then you can.
This is all about beliefs, so that's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of beliefs going on. So my guess or belief is that the soul does go on a journey, and the way I'm seeing it in my imagination, in my mind, or my intuition is it's like a thread, and the soul goes on quite a journey. We might take on different forms. We might show up as expressions of different animals or plants that I don't know about, but I do believe there's soul and consciousness with all things, all living things, all things. I would say all things. And there's like a more refined essence that expresses through living things. So my guess is the soul does go on a journey. It takes on many forms.
So are you
It
saying
existed before conception, and I think there
okay.
might be some point where we chose to be born, and then there's something that the cosmos or consciousness wants to express through us, through this particular life experience that we
So
choose.
you're saying that your soul, whatever makes you you, existed before conception and joined in with your body at some point?
I think it was a necessary part of creating my body, and I would assume that would be from the very beginning.
Do you think a fertilized egg ever doesn't receive a soul?
So this is what I don't know. I don't know when or how that happens. Well, there's a lot I don't know, and I'm okay with that. But just playing with ideas and possibilities, I wonder if there's like a moment where the fertilized egg becomes a soul, or if that soul knows that that's the journey, like the timeline they're going to follow, and so that it's already part of, fertilizing that egg. Like I don't know how that works. I mean, we're going into exploration here.
Do you know of any arguments that are something that somebody would say that's the opposite of what that belief system is? Someone who doesn't believe in souls, for example, who just thinks it's naturalistic, and maybe that's how your brain forms and your chemical makeup forms your personality, and the type of nurturing and the type of environment you grow up in makes you who you are. Have you looked into that, the opposite view of what you have?
I haven't, because it's not actually logical to me. It doesn't appeal to me, because I know I just don't see this life expression as, I've heard it called dead mechanized clockwork.
What does that mean?
So that, to me, that's like the atheistic or the non-spiritual view of reality. But
dead mechanized clockwork?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that term.
Well, we humans, we can bring pieces together of a watch or a clock, right? And then we can pull the pieces together, and then we can set the things in motion so that it operates and it moves and it tells time. And I think the belief of not having souls or not believing in any like greater power is basically believing that clock was created and functions and rolls just by itself. I don't know, because there was someone that started and put the clock together. So to me, it's just not logical. I don't really look into that belief set, because it doesn't make sense. Because there's some sort of energy that is continually putting creation in motion. Because I see it. It's my own personal, I am it, I see it, and it makes sense. And that's one of the great mysteries that I love to explore, is like, why are we here? Why am I alive? How is me being alive different than me being dead? And I think that's the word I come up with to explain it. And it doesn't, it's not something I can prove, but like I said, I see the effects of it. So I can label the cause as the soul.
So you see the effects. It makes sense to you.
Something is putting
more sense.
It makes more sense to me, because we're living the effects of something like that.
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, if you were to take some type of class or meet somebody who's an expert in the field who could explain how brains are formed and how there's no need for extra supernatural explanations, like it can all be explained naturalistically, would you be interested in listening to that? I'm not telling you that's right or wrong. I'm just, would you look into it, or just be like, no, thanks, I'm good with my belief system already?
yeah, if there was a logical, explanation of why things are, and they can say, hey, we're actually living on the back of a big turtle, and then there's this giant man and he's watching us and we're like little ants, and this is his experience, and his name is Jimmy, and he, and I'm like, wow, that is Jimmy. Like, if I could see evidence, but even that wouldn't explain why we're alive and why we exist. And, but I'd be open-minded.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, it just feels like a religion, honestly. Atheism, or the denial of a greater power, putting things into causality, feels like a religion, because.
In what way?
Because it feels like a limiting belief, a limiting set of beliefs where they've already decided the conclusion, which reminds me of Mormonism, or a lot of religions. They're like, well, this is how it is. There is no God. Well, it's like, well, then that's a belief. To me, I don't really dive into it, because it doesn't, I don't believe that. And I don't even like the word God, just because it's so charged in, my religious background and everything, but.
Right. And in that type of definition, like, I probably would tend to agree with you. Like, if somebody's making the claim, there is no God, that is a claim that needs to be backed up with evidence, right?
Right.
Which, how do you prove there is no God? There is no unicorns. There are no, Atlantis doesn't exist. How, you can't prove something that isn't there.
Yeah. Right. There's a lot of things we can't prove that are still true.
Right. Right.
So that's.
And like with a soul, do you think there is any kind of testing you can do to see if souls actually do exist or not exist? That people actually have souls?
I think it's just, I think it's just being alive and living in this plane of reality is the evidence of it. But I think you could go deeper and do like some experiments and scientific testing things. I think one of the interesting things I do, which is probably an interesting thing to also pick apart, is when I've done hypnosis and we've done what we call past life regression. Now, I know that's questionable. It could be the imagination or whatever, but you go into this deep trance and you're almost asleep, but you're awake enough to talk. And you're sort of, it's almost like witnessing a movie, but that you're in the movie and you're feeling the emotions and you're feeling the wind and the sun on your skin or whatever. So you're kind of there. That's what the past life regression is like. And I've done that before. And it brought up a lot of emotion and insight that explains some of, and this again is a belief. I'm asserting that it explains some of the patterns and irrational fears and weird things I have going on in my life as Melanie. Some of those hypnotherapy sessions have been very interesting, because it almost like, for example, I'll just go right into it. One of them, I felt like I was
before we get into that, can you tell me, how do you know those were actual past lives versus parts of your lives that were maybe subconscious, or that you've internalized and maybe not just brought to the forefront?
Yeah, so you don't know. I mean, there's no way of proving. Well, there are people that have looked up names of like who they were in past life, and they have found names. And there's some really interesting stories and things like that, where it almost looks like you could build a case that past lives exist. Like this young boy that was really drawn to a certain island and a certain airplane crash, and he was 4 years old, and he kept talking to his parents about it. And then he said, like, my name's David or whatever. And anyway, they found a guy that named David in World War II that crashed a plane. And it was like, so like funny things like that happen. It could have been made up. It could be his real version of events, who knows? But I know, so that could be considered evidence, that past lives are real. And
don't you have to weigh the strength of the evidence to your confidence level? So like, there's a bunch of stories that may or may not be made up. Like if you're in a court system and you have all these testimonials or something,
Right.
some of them are going to be more important than others and maybe give a little more weight. And like, I don't know, can it ever bring you up to that 100% level that we have souls based on people's testimonies that may or may not be made up?
I would say I can't be 100% about the past lives, but I'm comfortable feeling confident about the souls, again, because there is an energy that's putting the causality of the effects that we see in our lives right now. So to me, I'm comfortable calling that the soul, and I'm comfortable feeling confident about that belief. But about past lives, not as confident, but I'm still intrigued enough to explore it, and I don't dismiss it, and I will do it again in the future.
Yeah. It sounds like fun, if nothing else. Yeah.
Well, one of them, I'll just briefly tell you, one of them was it felt like I was in Scotland and I saw all these rolling hills, and I just felt this like incredible loss, like just deep, deep sadness. And I could see this ship sailing away, and I knew like this, it sounds crazy. It might be like a dream, so I'll just, share it that way. But I knew I had like a wife and kids in that boat, and they were going somewhere. And I know that in this life, they didn't return. And I just remember feeling so heartbroken. And like, I felt like I never really recovered emotionally. I wasn't really a functional human. And sometimes when I feel deep, deep sadness, I'm like, where is this coming from? Because my life has been pretty great. I haven't had any major losses or big traumas or anything, thank God.
You haven't? I mean, we can talk about that.
As far as like
when it's not being
right. Oh, you're right. Actually, I probably need to be more real about the pain of some of the stuff that I have gone through, and actually like connect it to this life.
I mean, I saw a lot of your childhood. There's some things.
There were things. Yeah.
So anyways, go on. So
but when I think of like death, like we have a big family, and we still haven't lost like, anybody in our immediate family or our children, thank God, But anyway, so I felt like that explained like some of the sadness. I was like, am I still like feeling the energy of another lifetime? Anyway, so that's kind of what it does, where and some say, well, that's part of like spiritual work. So when you go into these lifetimes, or you get these perspectives, then you can kind of release it or see it for what it is, and not let it affect you in this life as much. So I know there's a lot of beliefs in there, but
well, and the connection with past lives would connect to having a soul, right? Because your soul would just have different lives continuing on in different forms,
right?
So
there's a lot of beliefs,
so it's applicable.
I will say, if it counts as evidence, there are a lot of religions and like mystery schools and bodies of work where there's a lot of people that are having similar either beliefs or insights or explorations. So it's showing up a lot in the human experience as a common belief. I don't know if that adds evidence, although in the Mormon church, there's a lot of people that believe it, and it doesn't make it true. So.
Right. And I think we talked about that at the meeting you were at, right? About the number of people that believe something doesn't necessarily make it any more or less likely to be true.
Yeah. So while I was saying that, I was like, oh, I can already feel my words. But there might be, as we talked about it, I think that doesn't mean there's not something to it, because I do believe in common sense. And I do believe, and by that, I mean, I believe there's like a truth that can be known and felt. And I think most people have access to it. I think because of the dysfunctional world we live in, and all the people are trying to control each other, that our common sense either gets buried or convoluted. But I do believe we all have access to.
Yeah. What do you think common sense is? And how common is it?
Yeah. So again, I think I'm going to go into some beliefs here, but I believe common sense is our connection to truth. And I think kids are so great because they're still very connected to it. And that's why they just speak what they think, and that they offend people, but they're not really offended. They say funny stuff is because they're so tapped into like common sense. And I think as adults, we create these stories and we get all convoluted about our beliefs, and that we start denying our own common sense. And I think that's like a big problem with the world right now. That's why we can barely operate and have clean water and clean food and take care of our children in the community because we lack common sense, and we rely on institutions. Really, we rely on institutions because we think they have more moral authority over us than our own common sense. And I think that's unfortunate. And I think it's by design. I think it's there is a massive groups of people out there that do want to control humanity. And so,
yeah. And aren't a lot of people just willing to be controlled, and they want somebody an authority figure to tell them what's right and what's wrong and how to live and what to do?
I think it's a form of cowardice.
Seems pretty common.
I think it comes from dysfunctional families. Like I call it the mommy daddy syndrome. People that didn't have their, especially like fathers, like their father wasn't around, or their mother, or both of them were just working so much that they were raised by the state. Either they got the school breakfasts in the morning, and then they got school lunches, and then the teachers and the whole institution spent a lot more time with them than their own parents. And so then they go off to college, and then they're just so easy to indoctrinate by this system. And they never got a really good, loving guidance from their own mother and father. So they just became totally easy to control. And I think that's a big problem. So they've denied their own common sense, and then they rely on authority. And I think it's because early in their formative years, they were formatted by, institutions. And so I think it's a big reason we have major issues in the world.
Yeah. And like we were talking about earlier, the whole concept of teaching your children how to think instead of what to think is just not done. Children aren't taught to be curious and ask questions and look for, or to be a little bit difficult children who like to push the boundaries and just see, well, why do I have to do this? What does this mean? And look for valid answers. And what are valid answers? What's good reasoning to do stuff, to accept things. We're just not taught how to do that.
Yeah. And how do we, and that's why I love what you're doing. It's like, how do we create an environment where it's okay to question, and it's okay to open yourself up and have somebody question you? It's not attacking you in any physical way. If there's any fears that come up, it's just like ego stuff. Like it, and
it's okay to be wrong and to say, I was wrong. Oops, I didn't know. But now that I know these things, I'm changing my mind.
Yeah.
I think I used to believe this, but now that I've seen this other evidence, it's convinced me to be over here instead of over here. And that's okay. Like that's how we learn and evolve and grow and develop as people. And that's what we need. And our kids need that too. So I hope, I wish I would have done that to my kids when they were young, taught them how to think.
Yeah.
But
you
school
did,
doesn't
though.
teach them that.
I think
eventually.
Parents, I think when we do the work on ourselves, it gets kind of weird because we get to a point where we've grown in a way that we don't do certain things anymore. But then when we see our kids, they're playing out some of our dysfunctional patterns. And it's like, oh my gosh.
For sure.
Then the moment we see it, we can shift it. And I love telling my kids, like, hey, like for me, the scarcity mindset, that I'm not worthy of making money, or
I don't deserve good things. Yeah.
Right. I don't deserve abundance. And so I have totally.
It's selfish to ask for stuff.
Totally.
But just basic things. Yeah.
Like, things to take care of your life in a way but now that I've shifted that, I do see that in my kids. And I love just telling them, hey, I used to be this way, and this might be why you think this, but this is going to help you, and this needs to shift. And why do you think this way? Like, getting them to question those things.
Yeah, I really liked how this stood out to me a couple of weeks ago when you were visiting. You said, I was like, blah, 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 but I don't know. And you're like, Don't say, I don't know. Don't discount what you are just said. Like, you do know, you said it because that's what you think and that's how you feel. So don't just automatically dismiss everything you said by saying, I don't know. So I've been thinking about that a lot lately too, and trying to incorporate that, but I don't know.
A lot of people.
I still do it.
A lot of people do that. I noticed. I thought it was like our family, but it's a lot of people do that.
Yeah, it's pretty common. Yeah, I notice it in my kids too and other people.
Well, I think what we're doing, which is good, is we're saying I'm open-minded. So both can be true. Like you can know something and keep an open mind for more exploration around it. But it's okay to know stuff.
Yeah. And stand up for what you think is true. Like it's okay. Even if you're going to be wrong about it, that's okay. Like change your mind. Okay, I have one more question. And then, well, I say one more, but sometimes it turns into more. Okay, so you're at the 100% mark, back to souls, 100%. Is there anything that you could learn or discover in this world, in this life right now that would bring you down from the 100% to even to a 99 or a 98? Or is 100% still where you want to be? Do you want to move that number?
I probably shouldn't have said 100% because that's not very intelligent. Because I could discover something like our lives are, and this is probably true, our lives are like a hologram, and it's almost like I'm picturing a DVD, right? So you put a DVD in the DVD player, and then there's a laser that reads the DVD, and then it displays it on the screen. So it's looking like that might be another way of understanding this reality. And so, and that, like when people say time doesn't exist, that makes sense to me if it is like that, because that means, if you're watching the movie Avatar and you're at that scene or whatever, and that in that moment where the laser is pointing on the DVD player, does that mean that's the real time of that reality? Or, when you put the DVD back on the shelf, time ceases to exist as it relates to that movie. And so if this reality is similar, then okay, there's a laser pointer on this here and now moment. I mean, that's what the infinite now really is.
Right.
Then maybe we are just experiencing this hologram, and maybe it doesn't make sense to call it a soul. Maybe it's just more like a complex hologram. So I guess I could leave it a space where it's not 100%.
And there's really not any way to know.
Yeah, there really is.
Is there? Yeah. So what would be a more accurate number to be at than 100?
I still feel, okay, so if that's the case, because I do believe it's probably that too. So I still think there's a soul, and I think that does relate to the laser pointer, which is another form of looking at the here and now. So I'm just not going to say 100%, just because I want to stay open to exploration. I'll use that 1% for fun. So I'll go 99%.
Yeah. And that does leave you a tiny bit of wiggle room that your mind can be open to new information and just be like, maybe I'll look into that and see, is it going to lead me this way or not? But
and it's weird to quantify it, from 100 down to 90, it's really weird to do that. But so, yeah, I guess a window is good to leave open, even if it's a little one.
Yeah, I remember thinking in Mormonism, I was looking back to like, when did I go from 100? Like, because I was totally at 100 in Mormonism. Like, and just dipping down that tiniest, opening that window just enough to like peek through and see what might be in there. Like that was the hardest part right there, is going from 100 to 99.
Well, you go from 100 to complete collapse.
Yeah,
it went from do that pretty soon.
100, 99, really low, like pretty quick.
I find it so funny how people hang out in that like 70% zone for like a year, or like, it's like, no, if it's not true, then freaking go to the lake on Sunday. Let that go. Like,
it's so complicated. There's so much more involved. Your relationships and your eternal salvation. It's not a question you take lightly. You can't.
Well, and I think it's another good thing to look at is fear. Like, why is there so much fear? Like, are you really afraid of dying? Is that really what it is? Which I'd say probably like, okay, so we're all going to die. We're going to cease to be in this body. Like, do you need Mormonism to tell you that you're going to go on to the magic kingdom and then have your husband's going to have a bunch more wives? Like, why do you need that whole story? Like, does that feel comfortable for you? I don't know. It's just ridiculous.
I think that you're onto something there, though. There is a big fear of death.
Yeah.
Well, it's the unknown, right? Like what happens afterwards. And it's a very comforting story to know that you're going to have mansions in heaven and have surrounded by your family, and it's going to be loving. Like it's a nice story. Like it brings comfort. And then you know your loved ones who have passed away before you can say, well, they're in this great place. So, and I hope I can join them someday. It's right. Very comforting.
Well, and maybe that's maybe there's fears for me too that is coming up, which is inviting me to look more into the fact that there's a soul and it goes on a journey. Maybe that's based from a place of fear too, like my own fear of not existing. So I want to come up with that. So I'm open to that. I also stand by that. I do see us as living expressions of something divine. Now, whether or not our soul goes on a journey as some sort of individuated Melanie version, I don't know. I like to explore it, and I feel like it could be true.
It's fun to think about.
Based on fear. I'm open to that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That sounds very insightful.
Yeah.
And something maybe we should explore in another interview.
Yeah. Actually, I think we should. Like, is it fear? Yeah.
Fear-based. Yeah. Because that is a huge motivator for a lot of people.
I mean, ceasing to exist is kind of freaky. I don't want to suffer either. That's another fear, is like being alive and suffering. So.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's the fear of hell and eternal torment and punishment, right? Like sometimes it's the desire of a heaven in this wonderful place that motivates people. Sometimes it's avoidance of the negative suffering and permanent torture forever. Like I'm more scared of that, so I'm going to be good, than I really want this, so I'm going to be good. Right. So like where are we on that?
It's kind of fun just to surrender to the mystery, though, you know, because they're like, look at a newborn baby, like that being has completely surrendered to that experience. They have no choice. Like somebody could drop them at any
minute. They're along for the ride. Yeah. They're
just totally surrendered to the experience. And that's what we do as we get older and as we go into our own death. It's like, okay, there's a point where you're just like, you go down the slide, you know, like at the water park, and you're like, whatever.
Ooh, we'll see what happens at the end. We don't
know. Precious newborn was very trusting. Then that precious dying person needs to also be very trusting. And I don't know, I think the universe has so much beauty, and just the way it does want to express when it's not messed with. I mean, even just going out in nature here in Catalina Island, and like, there's this big part of the island that's just untouched. I mean, they've had animals and they've had to work to like try to keep it completely untouched. Oh, it's not completely, but I mean, but there's been a lot of effort, and you feel that. You feel this like divine expression of God or the universe, and it's just so beautiful and orderly. And I do think it seeks balance. And so that's why you know, when I die, I say this now, it's easy to say now, and I hope it's true, but when I die, I hope I can surrender and like trust into that process, because there is a lot of beauty around, and there's something going on that it does support order and beauty and peace. I see that.
And that reminds me of our other conversation that we had too, when we're doing the survey about it. I don't remember what the wording is, but just saying, I don't know, when we don't know something, and just accepting I don't know as an answer, and just like at the top of the water slide. You don't know how, like, I don't know what's happening here. I hope it's going to be fun. I hope I don't get injured. I hope I don't drown at the bottom.
Or the birth canal is a tube.
You could make so many analogies probably, but just the I don't know, and just embracing the I don't know, and being okay with that. I mean, it can be kind of scary to not know or not have any idea, and be like, I have no clue what's happening.
I think that's why it's kind of beautiful, you know, when I think of the birth and the death, like it does come full circle. Like that baby, they might have discomfort. I really hope they don't. I think about that, their whole experience coming out, whatever. But
they must, like, imagine it doing it right now. Like,
I just hope they're like asleep.
Can't be great.
It's got to be terrible, but they're not in fear. Like, think of all the irrational fears a grown adult human that's going through the death experience that must come up for them. You know, all the bullshit, religious stories of hell and all that. That's got to create a lot of unnecessary garbage. I hope we can learn from those newborns about how to handle that.
Well, and fear is probably based on the projections of not knowing what's going to happen. And you put all these bad scenarios into there that are terrifying. A baby doesn't have those yet. So it's just like probably physically uncomfortable and hurts and is annoying.
They're very, they're present in the moment, but they don't create any stories. And I know we're almost done here, but I did a horse trauma healing workshop. It was so cool because apparently horses are very in the now moment and they just don't create stories. So that kind of reminds me of the newborn. And so they can go through what he showed us by binding the horse's legs. They actually go through a very stressful, traumatic experience, but he guides you through it to the point where the horse surrenders to the process, and the horses will end up laying in the sun and people can go up and pet it. The horse literally is not in any threatening situation. Nobody's going to kill it. It's surrounded by love.
It's
but
safe.
Yet there's so much fear it has to let go of. And that's the whole workshop. It's just so beautiful. I think everybody should do one of those at some point.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's cool. Anyway, so
wow. Yeah, so our time is up, but yeah, thanks. This has been super interesting.
Yes.
You're okay if I post it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm willing to dig deeper and unpack some beliefs, because I think there's some really good stuff that came out.
There's more to go, I feel like. Hey, I got some Street Epistemology t-shirts. I'm gonna send you one. Okay.
Yay, that would be awesome.
Yeah, text me your address.
Very cool.
Where you're visiting or wherever you are. So thanks, Melanie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's been fantastic. I'm going to end the recording here.
Okay.
Say goodbye. Bye. Wait, where's the recording thing? Stop it there. Okay. Yes.